As Malcolm's attorney, are you acquainted with the names of those who might have been responsible for this deed?
I know that Malcolm made a statement to the police as to who he thought might attempt to kill him. As to knowing their names, I don't know their names, no.
Would you like to say a word or two, Mrs. Malcolm X, about the charges made by the press some time ago that he returned from Red China with a lot of money, trunkloads of money?
Oh, yes. They were wondering, how he was supporting his family. And they were saying that every time he came into the country that he would, bring bucket loads, literally speaking, bucket loads of money in, from these, from Red China and countries like that. It was ridiculous.
In another area of life, at one time when he was a member of the Muslim League, he seemed to have disrespect for the civil rights leader, particularly Martin Luther King, and we noticed in recent months since he organized the Afro-American Unity Organization that he changed in his attitude toward Martin Luther King. Did he talk with you about that at all?
Yes, well, I think you'll find that his attitude changed tremendously after he left the Black Muslim movement and traveled abroad. He made 2 trips abroad. And the last one, he spent 5 months abroad, and it really broadened his scope, so to speak.
Well, they say travel broadens your scope, and as much traveling as I did during the past 5 weeks, I think I would be in bad shape if it didn't make my scope at least more broad than it was before I left. One of the things that I learned in the Muslim world, I didn't see any racism. I didn't see any conflict between the people over there because of the colors of their skin or the differences in color of skin. And in every country that I entered, there were Muslims who were black, brown, red, yellow, and white. And there was no racist attitude in any of them. Then when I was in Arabia during the pilgrimage, I had many different occasions when I would be involved with persons who would be considered white in America, who would be called white. They had blue eyes, blonde hair, and white skin. Yet they themselves didn't act like American whites act toward non-whites. There was a bond, a mutual understanding. There was an attitude of brotherhood practiced at all times. I analyzed it, or I should say at least I studied it, because here in America, our experience always was, it was almost impossible to find whites who didn't act white, especially around non-whites. So the conclusion that I reached was that these people who had accepted the religion of Islam, who had accepted the existence of one God, automatically the chain reaction effect that this has, they would also have to accept the fact that everybody belongs to one family, one human family. So by accepting the oneness of God and the oneness of the human family, I believe the tendency to look upon each other according to the differences in color automatically was eliminated. Since they didn't regard themselves as white per se, as the American white man does, they didn't act white. They acted like humans. They acted like they were part of the human family and all others present were part of the human family. Now this was the first experience, or the first time that I had ever experienced this. And as I wrote to some friends, if the religion of Islam could eliminate racism from among the societies that exist in Africa, Asia, Europe, and Arabia, then it would do well for the American white man to expose himself to get to a better understanding of the religion of Islam, and perhaps it can remove some of the racism, which is like a cancer that is destroying the American society today. And the only thing that ever gave me the impression that there was any hope of eliminating racism from the hearts and the minds and the attitude and behavior of the American white man was the fact that I had seen proof positive in the Muslim world that the religion of Islam had removed it from them.
Welcome to the Gilchrist Experience. It's the second show of Black History Month, or the third show? Second show. But here we have my hero. You see his transition or transformation from the early days when the white man was a devil. All white people were devils. And due to this traveling exposure, he saw white skin acting human, he says here. I mean, it sounds familiar, yet we were all alive at that time and of a good age to understand all this, Leroy and I, at least. The rest of you are too young to really, youngsters amongst us. Welcome to the show, my family. Professor V.K. Pearson, it's always a pleasure having you here.
Thank you.
It's a special day for us. You've got a book here on Malcolm, and I thought I'd present to you by Betty the Shabazz production. This piece was. You saw Betty in this, or you saw the lawyer, Malcolm's lawyer, who was
Percy Sutton.
Percy Sutton. And we got a good look at Malcolm after he came from abroad, where he changed his attitude. He had, out of the movement and found new light. Tell us how this impressed you.
Well, that is such an important understanding of Malcolm as a human being. But so I had the pleasure of compiling a course called Three Transformation Toward the Building of a Nation, El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz. And Malcolm's transformations were unique because they were very succinct with what was happening around him at the time. And of course, we know about his hustling years and the difficulty of deciding to go into a life of crime in order to make money and to be successful in that order, although he was a very intellectually astute criminal in the sense that he was never, criminal attitude is always based on survival, and Malcolm was far beyond survival. He had a family base. He knew his father. He knew his mother. He was a love child.
That's right.
So he wasn't from that experience. So in that form, he goes through the transformation into prison. And in prison, again, is starting a process of transformation. And then during the time in prison, accepting Allah as his personal savior, began to transform his belief system, his goals, and his exceptional and extraordinary ideas for what could be done if he accepted the reality, although in that transformation, he was most astutely defiled by the white American race and what was happening in America. To actually go through that transformation, he had to begin the hate.
We might mention his father was killed by the Klan.
Right.
Absolutely.
And his father was a Garveyite.
Absolutely.
So he was raised in activism, self-esteem. He had no doubt that he was something. He was self-taught, was it? No, I'm sorry, he wasn't self-taught.
Well, he only went to the
first in
7th
his
grade.
class.
Yeah.
Right, 7th grade. You could say from the 7th grade, he had never returned to school.
Is
Not
that right?
formally. Right, 13 years old was his last educational
father
experience in Lansing, Michigan, at a school where he was told by his teacher that he would never become a lawyer, although it was his internal desire.
To be a
Again,
lawyer.
but even with that, he had amassed a understanding of the world and the concept of what limitations people would put upon you. You know, not himself, but placed upon you. But he began to see from that moment on that there were definitely two Americas, and that he was definitely not in the
Let's talk about the
privileged
effect
one.
that his mother being in an institution for 25 years, how did that affect him?
I think that is a very, very sore topic, I think, in all of the Shabazz family world, to understand that their grandmother had been locked away. And I don't think she would have been if the concentration for building the nation. I find it unusual that the elder brothers and the elder sister did not take the time to get their mother into another place or even take her into their homes. And they waited for Malcolm to get to a place where he was prepared to release her. And it's obvious that when he went to ask for her release 25 years later, she was released. And I think that's a very sore point. I think that was I think his entire feminine understanding and his understanding of women was really canceled by not having had a tremendously close relationship with his mother that I think began at his early childhood.
I find that very unusual for a man of his stature to think about his mother being in a mental institution for all that time.
But remember, too, that there were 9 of them. Malcolm is the 7th child.
The whole family. How is it?
A family.
You know, mental health, a topic which is really now being discussed across the country, and the mental health of black people. We have a very sharp rise in suicides amongst black people today, especially amongst our young people. Going back to the time of Malcolm as a young man and as a child, people didn't talk about mental illness. And people with mental illness were shunned. You were put away, and people moved on. That was pretty much the norm. And I thought about Quincy Jones, as if I recall. His mother also had mental issues in his autobiography, talking about the instability of his mother. So when we have families, you got to look at the trauma that hit this family.
Exactly.
His father's been murdered, you
in
know,
such a maniacal way.
in a violent way, and it was the norm for men to be done away with in the presence of family members, where they might be seen, you're lynched, you're hung, you're dismembered, and the impact that would have upon a woman now who has these children. You know,
and she foresaw him getting killed. She warned him not to go to town.
That's right. She had a
night.
premonition.
Right.
So she was obviously the person in the family who did have a gift of sight, and she did. But you know, I wanted so much. I was so happy to hear Mr. Weatherspoon speaking about the trauma, because what she experienced as a mother at the demise of her husband, the murder of her husband, just one, the murder, and then holding your family together with a large farm to have to maintain, young children. Malcolm was very young, and his brothers and sisters were young. The older ones were just teenagers, and you know, he was not even above 10, right? So just holding that together without a man in the house, without someone taking that. Their father was a very, Mr. Little was a strong representative of male energy in the home, but also as a man and a Garveyite and a person of you know, of self-reliance.
Do for self.
Right, and he really instilled that, and I do believe that they all have that, they had that within their biorhythm, but I do believe that Malcolm's mother, and it needs to be understood, was traumatized. Just, you know, and slowly deteriorated. I mean, her deterioration as a parent wasn't, you know, rapid forward. It was a matter of her being independent and not having the ability to be independent, having to work and go out of the home and be a servant. She had never been a servant. She was able to maintain the household as a woman taking care of the children, having to be a servant with a family, you know, liturgy of never going out of your home, working for yourself, doing for yourself. Her pride was taken, and then the state, you know, the system stepped into that home, and that began her demise.
Put in foster care.
Yeah, the children were put in foster care, and she was taken away because she couldn't even continually get the children to school, and that was what really caused the demise. Is that at that particular time and era, schools were very alerted to children's missing a lot of school time.
And she always had the fear of somebody coming down and burning down the house.
Again. You know, remember, they had been burned out
Twice.
Once. Right. She had been, well, Malcolm had been burned out with his parents, and then she had been burned out.
With the kids?
She had been burned out in 2 different towns. That's what I meant to say.
Right.
In 2 different towns.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
So she understood trauma, and
Another
that's really
thing,
what she experienced.
in 1900, black people owned well, I think over 10 million acres of land in this country. And it was not unusual for black people to be forced off of their land and their land taken and sold. Even the black farmers of today have been losing, well, up until I was in a conference in Cincinnati about 15 years ago, and they said black farmers were losing something like 1,000 acres of land a week.
Oh, wow.
Because the federal government, with the farm subsidies, was not giving money to black farmers. They were giving it to the big agricultural Monsanto and corporations that didn't need financial aid. They were getting it, and black farmers were not getting it, so they were subsequently losing their farms. And you're seeing the carryover now with this administration, where the farmers have been suffering with this trade war and the soybeans. The China just canceled the entire soy crop from the United States about 5 months ago. They said, all right, forget it, we're not buying any soybeans. So now all of these farmers across the country, they have a crop they can't sell. As quick as China said, we won't buy from you, Brazil said, we'll supply you. And China is getting all of their soy from Brazil. But black people have systematically been, black people have been attacked on every level, physically, mentally, psychologically, educationally, medically, spiritually, you name it. And this is one of my challenges to students. No matter what profession you choose, anything you can choose to do honorably and professionally has a negative impact upon our people. Everything.
Run that again.
No matter what profession you choose to enter, it has a negative impact upon our people. My question to them is, what are you going to do to lessen that impact? Your college degree is not, right, your college degree is not to go out and make money, buy a house, buy a car, and all this stupidity. Because when you get in there, you will see how your people are being victimized routinely in every way, in every profession. Don't care what it is. I went into law enforcement. I saw what was going on, and I took my stance and did what I had to do through that period. Every person needs to take a stance wherever they are. School teachers, a plumber. I don't care what you are. You know, my brother-in-law was a plumber, and white guys told him they didn't want no niggas on the site. And a guy attacked him. They had to call the police. That's a labor union, all right? They don't want you in the labor union. They don't want you anywhere. The book, Black Apartheid, sister who is a medical doctor, when you go back and look and see how medical research is done and how black people were treated through the medical research field, it's atrocious what they did to black women. And when you get medicine, the medicines are tested primarily on white people. And if it works for them, it's okay. Everything doesn't work for black people that works for white people or for Asian people. There are distinct differences in our genetic code, and those things are not taken into account. So there's not a one glove fits all.
Well, you know, when we came up in the 50s,
I was there.
I mean, our crew, you know how we were. You know, I mean, in '59, I was going to the Waldorf. You couldn't tell me where I couldn't go. If you told me I couldn't go there, I was there. That's exactly where I went. If you told me I couldn't do something because I was black, I looked at you like you were crazy and went on and did it better than anybody else. It was always a challenge to us in our time. I mean, that was here in New York. And it was buffoonery, this racism, especially in the 50s. Isn't that the way we came up, Leroy?
We came up that way, and we didn't know a lot of things that were going on at the time.
That's right.
Pardon me. I want to go back to the just hit this mental illness piece. You are indeed blessed if you're a black person in America and you don't have some kind of mental offset.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Some kind of, could be lack of confidence at the minimum. Could be undocumented or have a fear of something and there's no reason for you to have a fear of it.
Right, a phobia.
So the issue with his mother when one looks at it from a social scientist standpoint, and I don't claim to be one, but I've read those books, we're in a crucible, we're in a petri dish, and they are constantly putting stuff in the mix that would have us criminal-minded, perverted-minded today,
Okay.
perverted-minded, etc. Violence against black women, that's being programmed into our community.
By the music.
So the point about studying his mother, that's a whole study in terms of not just Malcolm, just in terms, and then the taking away of the children, where they've done that down on the border, where the so-called wall is to be built, and they don't know where these thousands of children are. They don't know. This is what they're saying, not Brother Leroy. This is what they say. They are taking these children away and snatching them, and what we as black people have to realize is that that's what happened in the so-called slavery time.
Absolutely.
The
It's right
taking
back
away
at
of your
it.
children and trauma. And you read these stories about black women who were captives being brought into slavery, killing themselves and their babies before they got here and after they got here. You know, and anyway, that's one thing. But going back to seeing Caucasians in Muslim countries, seeing Caucasians in a Muslim country, and those Caucasians not acting like the Caucasians here.
Right.
The key thing is that they're in a Muslim country where they believe and practice Islam, coming out of the same book. So there is, quote, freedom, justice, and equality in that environment. So I thought it was a transformation that he was making at that time. I was not in the nation. I'm reading this thing in the New York Times front page, and I'm reading about the front page that he talked about whites not being devils or whatever the hell it was. But the fact of the matter is, the context is where he saw this. Now, Islam is practiced in America by Caucasians at the very top of this society, at least in the political realm. But you don't see these individuals having this benevolent heart. When Ellison, the black guy who was in out in the Midwest,
Congressman.
The congressman, he said, I want to swear on the Quran, and I wanted Thomas Jefferson's Quran. They went. So these people practice Islam in secret. They're called Muslim sons, but they don't have the benevolence that they would be forced to have in a Muslim country. So that has to be studied, not as a from my point of view. I'm not talking officially. For the first time, I said, wait a minute, it wasn't a transformation. He saw Caucasian people acting correctly human within the context of a Muslim country. That's not a transformation. It's played up as a transformation, his distancing himself from what he, quote, formerly believed and manifested in the Nation of Islam. He did not change, in my estimation.
But I don't want to say I beg to differ, only that something...
You can differ.
Yeah, but something...
Freedom, justice, and equality.
Yeah, right? But I would have to say that it was a transformation in the sense that there was a changing of mind. If I believe that all white people are devils, period, there is no way to change that. There is no way to move that. It is how they are born. It is how they are made up. They are not made up of as God's children. They are made up of an evil form. And I have given that to the food of my thought for 10 years or more. That is my particular premise. For me to wake up on any day or go anywhere to any country or village or a hillside or sit under the sun or by a river and change that thought, I'm transforming my belief system.
From your vantage point. From your vantage point, how you see it from your vantage point.
Well, could that not have been that his understanding of Islam was polluted?
Was, exactly. He was expanding it.
By the Honorable Elijah Muhammad in teaching that doctrine, which was not correct. but teaching it out of just what he knew and believed.
Because it was necessary.
But true Islam then. When I was in London back in '99 for a month on a sacred music tour. So we were singing through London, blacks, whites, Asians, Africans. It was a milieu of people, Buddhists, Hindus, Muslims, Christians, and Jews. And just like, you know, when Malcolm went to Hajj, his eyes were open, and that did change his thinking. Because now he's seeing Islam as it really is. It's not black Muslims. They're Muslims.
Right.
And it's not about black Muslims. It's the universality of Islam, of all the people coming from, whether they're from Mongolia, Europe, South America, Asia, China, wherever they're from, these Muslims have come together and they're worshiping. So he got to see the true form of Islam. And a lot of times, you know, as he said, the travel is what opens you up.
Right.
If you don't ever meet people outside of your immediate
box.
environment,
Agreed.
you don't really know anything. You're a big fish in a small pond. But it's when you get out and go different places and meet people and sit up at night till 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning dialoguing and getting an understanding of who this guy is. And we were sitting up one night with guys from Tibet, and we had interpreters, and the guy said, Tubum Ishua. So I heard him say, I said, what do you say about Jesus? He says, you understand? I said, no, I said, Yeshua is a Hebrew word, but they're using it in Tibet. And they said that Jesus, they call Jesus the Christ, the one who shows the way. All right? And there were brothers there from Cairo who came with a sheikh. And we're all sitting and talking and dialoguing our faith. We're not arguing. We're sharing amongst each other and learning from each other. And this is what I think Malcolm then got the full understanding of Islam and what it could do not only for him, but for other people. Because he saw so many different people from the race of man, from humanity, worshiping together when he went on the Hajj.
Hold tight.
The concept
That was
of
not,
devil.
that was the first time that he was in Mecca, but it was not the first time that he was in that part of the world.
So he knew it all along.
He didn't go to Mecca because he did not want to precede. This is what he told the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, based on what I understand. He didn't want to precede, he didn't want to precede the Honorable Elijah Muhammad in going into Mecca.
Okay.
The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, why didn't you go? He said, I didn't want to precede you going there. Okay. So he saw people. He saw people. I'm dealing with the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad as given to him.
Didn't Malcolm live next door to Muslims that were white? That's what I was told by Reverend Kenyatta.
In Corona?
No, in Boston.
Elmhurst.
Oh, I don't know. The thing is, let me go back.
But Malcolm had seen white Muslims before.
Yeah.
All right.
The teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is from Master Fard Muhammad. Our teaching is Allah in the person of Master Fard Muhammad. Now, people call
Persian,
it. I'm sorry.
Master Fard was a Persian, right?
He came.
Iranian.
I'm not going to go into that because I don't have that lesson in front of me.
Okay.
The point is that in Message to the Black Man, the book that all the viewers can get, Message to the Black Man, it has a section in here, the making of the Caucasian. That don't change when Malcolm goes to Mecca. The making of the Caucasian. That does not change in Malcolm when he goes to Mecca. He still knows who he's dealing with. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad says in his writings going back preceding Malcolm coming in, the writings that contain in the Pittsburgh Courier. The book is called The Invincible Truth, which is a repeat of these articles that appeared under the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's name. He says, we have always dealt with Caucasians, but we deal with them on a different basis. We don't deal with them as subservient to them. we deal with them as equals, and they understand that. We work for them as equals, not being subservient to them, and they understand that. They know when we come into their business that this is a Muslim, because we ain't chasing their women, and we ain't chasing our women, and we're not smoking and drinking, and we come back from lunch at the right time, and we don't eat certain things. So the teaching, the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad does not pollute Islam. It presents Islam to the black man and woman of America in that particular vein, to get us out of the subservient belief that the white man is God. What changed Malcolm? People talk about Malcolm X, and they talk a little bit, they talk more about El-Hajj Malik Shabazz. But El-Hajj Malik Shabazz is not El-Hajj Malik Shabazz without having been Malcolm X.
Right.
Absolutely.
That's his foundation. What was the base of his foundation? What was in that teachings that he was conveying that had converted him? It's the same thing. Who the black man is, who God is,
The teaching.
who the Caucasian is,
Right.
that Islam is our natural religion. It's not a religion. It's given in the Quran, it says, I give you Islam as a religion, but it's a way of life.
Right.
It says to the bumblebee, come out of that pile of crap. You're supposed to be over here getting pollen from flowers, not in some crap, picking up crap. So it teaches the bumblebee to be a bumblebee.
Okay.
The bumblebee is that African bee that walks around with two legs, male and female, in the wilderness of North America, otherwise known as the so-called Negro.
Amen. And with that, I mean, that's the teachings. Well said. I mean, well said. I mean, this
All
is
praises
very
due to Allah.
important. That was a training we needed. That was a discipline that was desperately needed.
Precisely.
To get out of this madness that being black in America is inferior. So you had to reach somewhere. We reach wherever we can reach. That's why they call it, the white man Christianity, a white man's religion. But it's the Klanmen run around with a cross and burning it down. Well, are they Christians? And we had a show last week with Clemson Brown talking about.
Oh, Clemson. I know.
It was.
But
it was
Christianity
heavy.
is not a white man's religion because Christ wasn't a white man.
That's
The
it.
biblical characters were not white.
All the people in the Bible were black.
They're black. They're
That's
Semitic
me.
people. Semitic people are not white. Jews are not Semites.
It's the lies we're fed.
The lies of the curse of Ham.
Yeah.
Genesis 9, it says, verse 1, and God blessed Noah and his sons. That's what it says. Noah gets drunk. He's naked in his tent, whatever, and his son is laughing at him, and the other two cover him up. And when he comes to, he's going to put a curse on the children of Ham. Now, you got to be stupid to listen to a drunk. That's the first thing. Your father's a drunk, and he's putting a curse on you when God has already said a few moments earlier, I'm blessing all of you. No man can bless you when no man can curse you when God is blessing you. Can't. No man can curse you. And as though we know the Hamitic people moved southwest across Sinai into what is the Delta, the Nile region, and the Nubians of the east coast of Africa. But let's understand, Noah wasn't white, his wife wasn't white, nor were his other two sons white. So even if he put a curse on one son, theoretically, they were all black people. They were all people of color.
Right.
So you can't justify and say,
Right. What are you
oh,
turning them into? The question is,
Right.
what was he going to turn them into if they were already?
Well, we haven't given you an
the
opportunity
original.
to talk about this book, have we?
Well, the book is a wonderful piece, but it's important to study the speeches, and I'm so happy you had that speech that you opened up with, to understand that those transforming realities. Malcolm's behavior, manifestation, and understanding out of the nation was significant because his attention was, at this particular point, he could literally be political, which he could not in the nation. He was actually being told not to get involved with other movements, not to coincide or coexist with the civil rights movement of the time, with other political forms and even politics as voting. The law of the land for the nation at the time was that members of the nation did not get involved in politics, which meant that they did not get involved in Senate, council, etc. Malcolm had always, in the latter part of his existence in the late 60s, become a spearhead for what was going on in this nation and how we needed to move. He befriended Reverend, not Calvin Butts, but Adam Clayton Powell, thank you. Adam Clayton Powell Jr. as a cohort, and became in Harlem, very succinctly entrenched in what was happening with us politically. But all of this was not something that was prevalent in the nation. So it was out of the nation that I think that, this Organization for African American Unity, as well as his religious organization, which allowed us to understand that he never gave up his Islamic faith, because he did create a world Islamic faith within the organization.
Well, I have a famous role, and I'm sure we run it all the time. Prepare to put on Malcolm at Oxford.
Okay.
That piece. Now, this is Malcolm, December 1964. A month or 2 months before he was murdered.
In Oxford, England, of course.
In Oxford, right. England. All right, at a debate where he comes out and says, I don't care what color you are, I'll work with you no matter what, to fight the system of white supremacy, really. Basically, you have that piece ready for us?
What I was showing him was this picture here of these statues that were found over in Egypt, Upper Egypt, of black men that were placed there or carved out of solid granite thousands of years ago. And if you notice, he didn't ever turn it toward the camera. He kept it down. Well, I started to turn it toward the camera, but I didn't. I was trying to be polite. And at that point. And but today in the Los Angeles Times on page 2, they have this same picture. You look in today's Los Angeles.
One, but we got confused in the back. But let's play this other one. I don't know why we didn't get the other one up. But this is from Gil Noble, another one of our heroes, my mentor, and his opinion on how we thought about Malcolm in the early '60s. All right. Play that piece then.
My first inoculation was Dr. King. And then that led me to Adam Powell and a lot of the people. But I was put off by Malcolm X.
Why?
Because what he was saying and the way he was saying it was too blunt. It was dangerous. And you didn't say those things in those days. I told you, we had been socialized as kids to get around wrong, not to confront it. And Malcolm spoke in very declarative terms, and he said some terrible things about white people that we thought, but you would never express it, you see. He talked about the way this country was not a democracy, but a hypocrisy, and he talked about what had been happening to us down south and up south. And he was not shy. He had and he was very, very intimidating. I'm man enough to admit it. There are a lot of people who are my age who will speak, with love about Malcolm as though it had always been that way, but that's not so. He scared a lot of us to death. And then, mind you, I had this apartment, a bachelor apartment on Convent Avenue, and I'd been having a lot of fun, And here he comes talking about a different way of life. First of all, he dropped his last name. Well, we had been socialized to take great pride in our last name. The more European it sounded, the better. There was not a flinch about, you know, noble. Oh, that's wonderful. If it wasn't French enough, you'd put an ETT on it, you know, to make it sound more French. And so here's a man who dropped his good last name and replaced it with an X. I thought the man was crazy. And then he talked about discipline. And he talked
self-discipline.
Self-discipline. He said that we do not believe in drinking. And at the time I would have a taste. And he said that we don't smoke cigarettes with or without a label on them. And I would smoke, you know, with a label.
Yes.
And he said, we don't eat pork. Well, you know, I love me some ribs. And then he said, we don't fornicate.
Yes.
And so psychologically, I said, Malcolm, I'll see you later.
Yes.
You know, and all. But what he was doing in deprecating whiteness, I came to understand later that he was rearranging the balance that we needed, because we had glorified whiteness and deprecated blackness. And so he was tilting, using exaggerated terms, to give us a sense of self and to take whites down a little as they needed to be.
So true.
The reason why I play this is because that's exactly the way I felt in the early 60s, you know, because 60 to 64, I wasn't here. I was off fighting crackers in the Marine Corps. I mean, and self-esteem was a must. And I was a boxer, so nobody called me the N-word. And I was big enough that I could handle myself. And my best friend, drinking buddy, was an ex-KKK man. But he took me as a, you know, he never met a black that would stand up to him and was smarter than him. I was the first guy in class, because I didn't go to town. I mean, in Memphis. I was in Memphis,
Well.
Memphis, Tennessee, in 1960, going to helicopter mechanic school. And I didn't go to town because the blacks in there didn't like me because I was a Marine and a New Yorker. And I just didn't, I mean, it was miserable going down.
But that was a matter of exposure then. So that Klansman met you.
Yeah.
And you changed his way of thinking.
Exactly.
You see, and I grew up in Brooklyn in the 50s. I was in Brooklyn. And East New York, murder capital of New York. But East New York then was a predominantly white neighborhood.
Right.
The only blacks that were in East New York when I was growing up were West Indian blacks. Southern blacks hadn't started moving up into New York.
They were in Stuyvesant.
We didn't meet a Puerto Rican until I was in the 6th grade.
Really?
No Puerto Ricanos, none in East New York. There were blacks, there were West Indian blacks,
yeah.
There were a few Italians. We had the mob in East New York. Murder Incorporated is not a rap group. Murder Incorporated came out of Brooklyn, East New York.
Right.
So you didn't come in East New York and mess with anybody.
What
White,
year
black,
we're talking?
I'm talking like 1954, 55.
Okay.
And
But how old were you?
I was in elementary school then.
Okay.
My father died in 53.
Okay.
And we were moving to Liberia in 1953 because my father had written this country off. He was done with it. And we had family in Liberia, so we were moving at the time that he died, which is why we stayed here. But the white people in East New York, the Jews in East New York, they were not the Orthodox Jews. They hung out. I had Jewish friends. They said, I want to be colored. Why? Because being colored is cool. This guy, Steven Silverman, he always wanted to be colored.
We got that in George Washington High School.
And we went to their Passover Seder's. They came over for Christmas. We did everything together. There was no friction but the Italians had a problem. There was a Catholic church 2 blocks from my house. They wouldn't allow Italians in there. They had to go to another church. All right? But that was
in the 50s.
In the 50s up into the 60s. And
Oh, in,
we
well,
had
in the 50s in Manhattan, Jews couldn't live on Park Avenue.
There was segregation of all sorts. The
right.
Irish had their thing, the Italians had their movement. All of this was happening in the country in separatism. And what I love about the piece that you just showed was that Gil Noble expressed the truth. The fact is that when Malcolm was telling the truth, the uncensored, unmitigated reality of the circumstance of the condition of people, he was telling it bold and without any filter. And everyone, including my parents, were afraid. And the fear was not that he wasn't speaking the truth. The fear was what will happen to you if you follow that truth. And so people backed off. And the reality was the strength of Malcolm, and I always say this, and with everything I've read and everything I've taught, the strength of him was having an organization that was a foundation for his strength. Elijah Muhammad allowed him to get involved so heavily within the nation that he traveled and began to build the nation and build apostles of the nation with a strength. I think there's, and as I'm sitting here with you beautiful brothers today, there's strength in brotherhood that is far beyond our imagination. When 4 or 5 brothers get together, you know,
there's a movement.
There's a movement and things happen in business, in medicine, in education. This is why you find even in the corporate America, 4 or 5 people at the water fountain of color, right? Don't let it be 4 brothers. The company might actually shut down.
NAACP meeting?
You
What
know?
you doing here?
Precisely, but what is that? That's the strength of the power of the black man. And what I love about Malcolm, and I think that every woman who is celebrating him, first his death this month on the 21st, and his life again, May 19th, every year, is celebrating the uncensored, unconquerable reality of masculinity folded up in a human being who was disciplined in his reality. And he was a Puritan. When he became a full-fledged, God-fearing Muslim, he lived the purity of that, of the requirement of that particular faith. And, you know, regardless of what your faith was, you had to admire that. Many women who were Christian or Buddhist or whatever, or even atheists, admired Malcolm in his unmitigated reality check for censoring America's wrongdoing. And in his later changing of reality, I don't really think it was I think he understood that there were good people in all ways. I think he even understood that because he came out of prison and he had met other people who were kind to him, who were not of his race. But I think that he understood that kindness was something that they had to go through with a sense of heart, and that the heart of a man could be transfixed with a God conscious. And I think that his God consciousness was impeccable.
That piece on Gil Noble, pardon me, for me, epitomizes how a professional black person reacts to the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Like that. Ooh. That changed quite a bit with the Million Man March.
Oh, yeah.
Because you had professionals who wouldn't necessarily go to a mosque at any given time. They coming out to the Million Man March, called by an individual from the Nation of Islam. What people, and I'm going to bring in Reverend Johnny Youngblood. In his book, he talks about, pardon me, how he studied the Nation of Islam, how they attract men, and he incorporated that in his church.
Absolutely.
The
St. Paul Community
St. Paul's Community, and he takes that message wherever he goes. He tries to infuse elements of that in his church, and so does others. So when you talk about Malcolm adopting Islam, is Islam as taught by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, as was given to him by Master Fard Muhammad. It creates a different individual. whether one likes them or not. It creates a whole different dynamic. And I'm doing a series on the show that I do called Elijah Muhammad, the Maker of Leaders, because it goes beyond Farrakhan, Malcolm, Muhammad Ali, etc. It deals with bringing out the leadership qualities in the black man.
Okay.
And the military, we talk about the black man as automatic, a natural warrior by nature. You see, and I'm not talking about us going to war with white folks or anything like that, but the stature that we take, the posture that we take, you understand? And that we give to young children. When the young children hear the word, see, for black people viewing this program, the message I would convey as a participant in this program is that you need to read Message to the Black Man in America. Why does it say Message to the Black Man in America? Why doesn't it say the black family? It says the black man because we've been hit in the head. In Masonry, they call it Hiram Abiff. Buried in the northeast corner of the temple. And only a master grip can pull him up out of the grave. If you don't have the master grip, that flesh is going to come off. He's buried in a shallow grave. And the point is that all of that is indicative of the sojourn of black people here in the wilderness of North America. And the fraternity that I pledged for, I didn't understand the ritual at the end of the thing until I got in the Nation of Islam. I said, oh, wow. They're talking about the Caucasian being run out of the heartland of civilization into the caves of Europe. That's what the ritual is about at the end. I didn't know. I said, wow, this is what's going on. That's in Masonry. Why do they wear the ribbon?
You're
not the apron. The apron because it's in Message of the Black Man. Others can tell the story better than I can. I'm a consumer, so I consume things. I say, wow, and I pick up things. I'm not good at regurgitating a whole story for anyone, A, B, C, and D. I'm good at telling you where to get the information from.
Okay.
And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, look, talking about the nature of people and do they change? If anybody should have changed with, quote, Malcolm going into a, quote, transformation, it should have been Caucasian people saying, yeah, see what Malcolm is saying? He is right about us. But did they change? Did they change? The lynchings in the 20s, in the 30s, in the 40s, in the 50s, in the 60s, and on. We saw one right here in America, right here in New York City. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Eric Gardner, that was a lynching in public, and they still haven't gone and prosecuted the guy who did it. Negroes, the comptroller said, I got them 6 million or 5 million, and it was good for the city. He didn't say it was good for them. He said it was good for the city. Right there, black people have said, oh, really? What's going on with that? You can't ask for no justice after you get some pennies from these people.
And that's the problem.
Well, how do we get together as a people?
How do we get together as a people? By recognizing, acknowledging that the God is in you, like Bob Lord says, Namaskar. You know, the God in you, I salute the God in you. So if we do that, not waiting on us to be in the same label, same fraternity, same religion, same church, but we all catching hell. Our children are catching hell. In a system that's geared to getting our children in debt to go to college.
That's it.
So when they come out of college, they ain't gonna make enough money to pay for the thing. They're gonna be in perpetual debt. Okay?
Which is their system.
In their system. Plus, our children believe, the American public, I'm dealing with black people, are being fed this materialism thing. NBA housewives, Atlanta housewives. You see them all, they go to a jewelry store and the husband is buying the wife over $100,000. I said, where does Negro get this money? You understand? I don't know what kind, but the thing is material. The
names they call each other.
You see how they've, the planned genocide today is to
menticide, genocide.
We're still suffering from these mental diseases.
And we are back there. We went from 1965 assassination to 2019 assassinations, almost as though those 54, 55 years didn't happen.
The only
and the
thing that
lessons were not
changed
learned.
is the date on the calendar.
And we got a madman in the White House.
Well, he's a product of, as
White
you would
supremacy.
say, of the 50s and
White
the reality of too many of us getting out of the barrel, and now let's put the lid on it. Let's make America white again, not great again.
What produced Trump is jealousy. He was so envious and jealous of a black man and what he was doing that he had to destroy it. He just got, and the man embarrassed him, and that was it. That's just a vengeful white supremacist.
They don't tell the story of what he did when he got in the White House to remove any vestige of Obama in that. They don't tell that story. That's going to come out in some book later on by an interior decorator.
We know.
Robert Colbert did a great piece last night, and he smacked Trump right between the eyes, because I can't remember. I have to go back online and look it up. But whatever it was, the punchline was, "Oh, just like Obama." You know, he talks down about Obama, but there was something he was trying to do, and I got to go back and look it up on demand. And it was in his opening, and he said, "Oh yeah, just like Obama." As much as he's trying to denigrate Barack Obama, any good thing that he can do only uplifts the name of Barack Obama.
Again, it gets us right back to where we started. A man as a leader. We take a look at the 60s, we had Medgar Evers, beautiful Malcolm X in the middle, and Dr. King. Three magnificent men of valor, leaders. And it is, I mean, there were just hundreds, right? But they were being pronounced as saviors to us, but to the white America, they were those who carried their demise. And I think that Trump is just one who looks at growing up realizing that if you let black men in power, you can turn a race into a kingdom. And that was an anti-reality. That's an anti-reality.
I was relating to when we were kids, because I know there was a whole cast of characters that came out of that environment that had no fears. I mean,
no fear.
They were kings and queens in the 50s.
Fear.
I mean,
it's astonishing.
We hung out on a corner on 137th Street in front of Snooky's Sugar Bowl. And I know most of the people I can speak to there that were around in those days know that we had it. We were it. That mold was broken and never made and come back.
And what caused it?
I'm a part of it. Me and Leroy, we were there.
But what caused that?
So
the environment.
Yes, the environment, the protection, the love, the nurturing.
But we were disciplined. The God in you loves the God in you, and stay tuned for the more of the Gilchrist experience. Now, we got half a minute for the Bronx.
In terms of Malcolm, on YouTube, folks should go to Malcolm X's rare speech about black women and marriage.
Ooh, okay.
So it's came up within the last 2 weeks.
Okay. And is that one of the speeches he made in Atlanta?
No, this is straight out of the mosque.
And also,
he's giving a mosque teaching.
I definitely want people to, if they can.
Is that coming on again?
Yeah, this will probably be coming on again in May. The Smithsonian put out, I don't know if you can see it here.
Oh, it may be. The lost tapes.
Right, the lost tapes of Malcolm X.
Which we paid a section of.
Right. So these things have not been heard, but if you can Google the Smithsonian, and I do believe you can purchase copies.
Okay.
But it will probably come out again in May. I definitely want folks to be aware.
People. God bless.
Great.
Excellent.
Thank you for the opportunity.
You're one of the main cast members.
Hey, listen.
Indeed. Thank you for having me.